Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining per usual for Sunday morning coffee is the future governor of Virginia, TK Eppley. Today, we're going to be talking about burning the boats. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is Echelon Orchid.
Guess who's back?
Oh, I forgot to turn to the other camera. Bam! There you are, TK. What's going on?
Good morning, Dan. How you doing?
I am doing well. Hopefully everyone can hear you good. I can't see you very well today for some reason. Ah, there we go. That's a little bit better. Nice. So we're burning the boats.
Very good.
I don't know that many people know the where that came from, but I believe it came from Julius Caesar when he decided to take out England, and he got to shore, realized they were severely undermatched. They were the opponents were far superior to them, so he ordered them to burn all the boats. We're either winning or we're dying.
The way I've heard it was Cortez.
Cortez.
And when he reached the New World, he burned all his boats so his men would be motivated to live and be successful.
Man, I think they both have a similar reasoning.
Yep.
So, the two questions for you, and while you were in uniform, did this happen? And then, as a civilian, have you had to employ either of these two?
I think as far as being in uniform goes, I think one of the ways that you make it through something like SEAL training or special forces training or anything where there's a high attrition rate is you just make an agreement with yourself you're not going to quit. And you're going to figure out a way to do that. And one of the things psychologically, it's different today than it was back then. But back then, everybody had a Navy rate, right? You were something else in the Navy as you were trying to be a SEAL. I was an engineer, which means I'd be down in the hole all day long, being greasy and dirty. So that concept of burning that personal little ship that, hey, if whatever's going on here is temporary. It might be terrible, but it's temporary. If I go out to a ship, it's going to be hot and messy and everything else down there, and I'm still not going to get to do what I want to do. But what you used to see was almost disproportionately folks that were in administrative rates, like admin guys, corpsmen, and people that would have nice desk jobs and offices. They didn't burn that personal boat of saying, I don't care what happens, I'm not going back there. It became an easy optional. Hey, I can just think, and we've said it before in the show, quitting is all about how quickly you want to become comfortable, right? And I think when you start talking about, that concept of taking away all your other options, right? Because that's really what the burning boat thing is about. It's like, what are my other options other than success? Well, if you metaphorically take away all of them, you give yourself the greatest possible chance to succeed. Right, because the other thing too is if you're consistently and constantly saying, "Well, I have other options," what are you not doing? You're not focusing all your attention on being successful at something that you said you wanted. So I think that's really where when we start talking about. I think over time you do it in the micro, right? You've said it before. Like at some point you take a job and then you'd make what was considered to be a wild statement about your success, so that you burned that bridge where you didn't have any outlet. You had to go after that now because you put it out there in the middle of the room, right? And I think that's another bridge burning tactic.
Yeah, I think it is. Part of it is at least for me when I go about saying this is what's going to happen, I'm drawing a line in the sand, and like this is where we're going to be. And I was talking to my boss the other day, and I said, look, I feel pretty good where we are overall as an organization. We're getting ready. I'm in the third budget cycle, and it'll be 3 years there in May. And I told him, I said, look, in 3 years, when I first came on board, I said, This is what we're going to be capable of doing. And now we're on the cusp of that. And so I've told, and every year I raise the bar for my teams. And year one, it's like, okay, let's so to speak, understand the situation that we're in. We'll make a few minor changes, but the big thing that I'm going to do is we're going to start investing in training in people. Year two, it's no longer an option to train. Everyone will do 2 hours of formalized training per week. Like that ends on a Friday. And funny enough, and not necessarily funny, haha, but I told all of my direct reports this past week. I'm like, look, I want to see the training records for every single person because everyone was supposed to keep a log. I'm going to see it. Because I know who's been training and who hasn't been, at least from a CBT Nuggets and a LinkedIn Learning, because I can see those reports. So those people that didn't hit their goal on a consistent basis, I'm not going to be looking to reward them a whole lot going into next year in terms of those salary increases. This is because
they have to think that what you offer them is 5% of your week is for you.
Mm-hmm.
All right? And think about how many businesses try to, they want 110% of the week to be for them. Right? And that's, I think, when you start looking in that, that's back in the day, like Google used to do that. You do the 80-20, right? 4 days a week you work for Google. The fifth day you contemplate and think about something. Hopefully it's going to help Google, but that you're passionate about, right? And I think that's how I would always articulate that is, we've given you 5% of 5% of your week to better yourself. Right, and that's 5% that you should be that you normally. I've always been on my own doing right after work or whatever. Right, you're sitting around with the kids and everything like that, watching TV, and it's like you're on a computer. Why? Because I'm trying to learn something new. Right, and for somebody to give you that, I think that's how you articulate it. It's like I've given you whatever 5% of your salary is. I've effectively given you that as a bonus every year to go take care of yourself. Why didn't you do it?
Well, right, and this is what I've told a lot of my people, like, look, this is my professional love language. It's being better tomorrow than you are today. And I take this and I put this in a personal stance as well as in profession. And I said, so, if you all aren't committing to that, then you're not committing to the culture I'm trying to instill upon the entire organization, not just those that work in IT. So I said, now, not only are those particular employees not going to necessarily get the raise, but depending on how many of your employees that work for you, you also may not, because as the manager, you're the leader. You're to enact this same culture that I'm pushing down as well, and I hold you equally responsible for your team's efforts.
Well, hold them accountable. You can't get them responsible.
Accountable.
You can make them accountable for everything, but you own the organization.
Right. Yeah, they're accountable for their people and making sure that this gets done as well, right? So I don't know that all of them like that. I know a couple that do. I know a couple are like, wait a minute, because they understand. They understand what the reasoning is, and I just go, look, is it any surprise that the people that I've hired directly, that are junior level people, that took this motto to heart, that all of them won Employee of the Month? Like, that's not me voting. That's all of the executives, which was about 32 executives.
Yeah.
That's 32 executives voted for my junior level employees to be Employee of the Month. And I never vote for my employees. If one of my employees is up for it, I basically abstain. I only vote when my employees are not in it, because I just don't feel that I don't feel I should. I just think it's the
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I get that. I think what we were talking about is and now you've had 3 years. It's you're starting to see the groundwork, the cultural groundwork you laid over time, and what you say, hey, here's who we want is somebody to show up and be part of what we're doing every day of the week. And now you're starting to see, that's starting to bear fruit, let's say.
Yeah.
right? And I think that's hard. It's like I think I've said it before on the show. I was very fortunate to come into the position I'm in now, and just have an amazing, culturally aware, hardworking group of people. Um, that every day of the week ask good questions. Sometimes they ask questions I don't want to answer because they're hard questions, but I do want to answer them. You know what I mean? It's like in the middle of the day, it's like, hey, sometimes I just want to say, hey, can we wait till the end of the day to answer this? But no, you ask a question, I'm going to try to give you the answer I can give you. But and even now as we start hiring people and get people in the building, um, I one of the engineers we're looking to hire. We were looking for an engineering position to fill, and this young man came in, seemed to be really nice. We have like a practical exercise, depending on where you want to work in the company. We have a practical exercise for each kind of functional group, just to kind of see what your thought process is, and more importantly, like there's the base level, but hey, how can we're going to have to teach you a lot. So how ready are you to learn, right? And where did you start from, right? And my direct reports do a great job of administering this and kind of getting them into the middle of the room culturally of who we are. And this young man shows up, and he's a little bit older. And he's just finishing up school, and the guy that was kind of hosting him and interviewing him asked him, "Well, you're in the military or stuff because you're a little bit older." He goes, "No, I was just poor. I couldn't afford to go to school full time, so I had to take classes, when I could, and I finally just finished up." And as an electrical engineer, right? And I was like, "That's the guy we want in the office, right? That's it. Every reason, you talk about burning your boats, right? Everything was put in front of him not to be successful, right? And to have an excuse why not to show up every day and keep pounding at it. But he did, and he graduated, and he's on his way in the world now. And as an organization, we respect things like that. And as we grow, there's some people come in, we're like, nah, they're not gonna work out for us, right? But I think that's great. You get what you ask for as a leader, and you get what you demand. And we've talked about this before. This concept of some people say, "Oh, as a leader, you got to be in before everybody else and out before everybody else." I'm not that stuck on time like that, right? I'm more stuck on results. And you got to provide. I think in today's world, you still have to provide an environment where, number one, everybody feels safe to contribute, and more importantly, like if somebody's got something to do, like they don't feel uncomfortable walking up to you and say, "Hey, I got to go into a doctor's appointment this afternoon," right? Because my guys put in a lot of hours, right? A lot of hours that above and beyond what's the minimum requirement for employment. So I try to take that into account when somebody's got to go do something, right? And I think because of it, and the culture we have, there's no abuses. I flaked out for a second, but I don't think there's any abuses, right? And I think now as we ramp up to get ready for 22, we're going to be asking ourselves to do things at a much more quick pace next year and everything like that. And I think as an organization, you got to be set up to do that, but you don't do it overnight, right? It's taken you 3 years to get to the point where now you can hold everyone accountable for a result based on all the input you've given them and said, "Hey, here's what I believe to be a good solid requirement, not just for me, but for you as well." Because it always comes back to that old thing, what if we spend money on people and they leave? And the CEO said, "Well, what if we don't spend it on them and they stay?"
Right. Yeah, and I think when I go back to the aspect of burn the boats. There was a couple of times that I really went and burned the boats. The first was when I first got married. I was young, and it kind of hit me. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. Now I feel like, at least at that point, I have to provide. And so, I had an okay job, nothing great. But I said, all right, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go find part-time work, and I'm going to go to the Computer Learning Center. It was like a trade school at the time. Because at the time I was like, hey, I'm good with technology. I grew up with computers. I know a thing or two, but I need to like formalize this thing. And it was 7 months, Monday through Friday, 7 about 7 a.m. till noon, and then I would go to work, and so be it. But that was like I'm all in, got to do it. All right, and I did, and I came out hey, here I am today. But there was another time as well. Now I'm in IT. I'm a manager at this company called American Wood Molding. For all accounts, like, hey, I'm on my way up. And then XM Radio happened. I'm like, that's where I need to go. And burned the boats again. Basically, here I go. I mean, I made I made a little bit more money going to to XM, but it's a startup company. There's like zero revenue. What could possibly go wrong? And I just
Subscription-based radio program where people are used to getting it for free for the last since Marconi.
right.
Yeah.
And I just said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And then the last time was when I moved to South Bend, Indiana. Like now, I really burned the boats. Like I left everything basically behind in a way, and here I am. But each time, I just didn't give myself like, all right, I'm just gonna go all in and make this happen.
Well, I think that's what I think in any decision, even if you just move jobs and it seems like a lateral move and stuff like that, actually, let me put it on the other side of the coin. As an employer, like, you have to realize that when people come and work at the organization that you're leading, is they've materially changed their life for you. Right? It's some factor. They were comfortable. In the most part, they had a comfortable job, something like that, and they wanted to try something new. And especially if you're, in startup land or post startup, where you're not a established company that has a great logo and everybody knows who you are and there's stability. Right? And I think when you look at that you as the leader of the organization, that you have to have not just empathy for that, but you almost have to celebrate that, because somebody's saying, hey, I was comfortable over there doing this. You guys look like you're having fun. It might all blow up tomorrow. We all might be sitting out in the street, but at least right now, let's go make it work. And I think that's a mentality to begin with, right? I mean, we've both been around in startup companies now. You know the type of person that's going to show up, right? And for the most part, it's good. Right? But I always like when you have a startup and you get these people that are interviewing that want the exciting startup lifestyle, but then they also want all of the the perks and benefits that come along with a mature company, right? And sometimes part of burning that bridge is that you've got to go, I'm going to start over in a whole bunch of ways, and it's the comfort of everything that a bigger company can provide you for kind of the semi-roll of the dice on a smaller company, that it's going to be what you think it's going to be.
Right. I'm reminded, and who knows how true this particular aspect goes. It's probably pretty true. But in the movie, Wolf on Wall Street, and the one guy comes up to who the Jordan, who's the main character, and he's like, "What do you do for a living?" And he's like, "Well, I do this." "You make good money?" And he's like, "Yeah, I made, I don't know, however much." He goes, "You show me a check for that amount right now, I will quit my job and come work for you." Like, I will. $72,000
is what he said.
That was what I don't remember. But he's like, "I will quit my job and come work for you right now." And
Yeah.
boom.
Then he gets on the phone or whatever he's at. He's like, "Hey, I'm out of there."
Yeah. He's like, "I quit. I'm not coming back." But sometimes that's just what and even who's the Robert Urchivek did the same thing. But in his case, like, he didn't burn his boats. Someone else burned his boats, and he didn't have he didn't have another
I know
option.
the feeling.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Yeah.
Someone else burned his boats, and he's like, I was out of a job, and well, now he created a multi-billion-dollar company.
I'll tell you what, I didn't think of it in the day this way, right? But move on a few years, and I'm actually, I'm actually somewhat glad it happened over the longer term, right? Because for a lot of reasons, one, it kind of makes you personally rethink and kind of reevaluate, go, hey, what am I doing and why? Um, but you get to see how everybody who said they were your friend, to whatever extent it is, whether they were or not, right? And I've personally found out that when you call people on it, they get mad. They get really mad, right? And it's maybe not mad and yelling and screaming, but they get mad and the excuse machine starts, right? When you're like, hey, here I'm here. I can separate the wheat from the chaff. I know who was here for me when I was down. I know who wasn't, right? And I have a friend, he's one of my oldest friends, but literally now, and this has nothing to do with that. These are the two separate friend groups, but we've been friends for 30 years now, and but past 10 years, the only time I ever hear from him is when he needs something, right? And he gets pissed off when I answer the phone and go, hey brother, what's up? What do you need? And he's like, why do you always say that? Because you don't just call me and go hang out anymore. You call me when something's wrong in your life and need help. Right? And I appreciate that you think I'm the guy that can figure it out, but I'm just, it's just the reality.
Every once in a while, I'd like you to just be, hey, how you doing? What's up?
Right.
How the kids? Yeah, I get that. It's funny because I've with some of the people that I've kind of coached along the way, and I kind of let them know that because some of them actually they're like, well, they've made it to that senior manager position or executive, and like their friends all of a sudden like start treating them a little bit differently, things of that nature, and I say they're like, well, yeah, I lost so and so as a friend. I'm like, no, you didn't. And like, what do you mean? I said they were never your friend in the first place.
Yeah.
Your friends are gonna clap for you the loudest when you succeed, and they'll be there for a shoulder to cry on. In both cases, they don't provide judgment. Doesn't matter. They don't. They listen. When you ask for help, they'll be there. But they're clapping for you the loudest. They're never jealous. They're never, well, so and so was able to. No. Mm-mm.
Right.
And
It's that old saying, just because you're on the same bus doesn't mean you're going to the same place.
yeah.
Right? And sometimes people get off the bus.
Right, and this is where we talked about a couple of weeks ago why eagles fly alone. There's an aspect that the higher up you get, like hey, you don't have that many like true friends. You'll have colleagues, you'll have acquaintances, you'll have the people that are always willing to show up to a party, but are never willing to throw one. They
Oh yeah, no doubt.
and hey, so be it. It's good to know where they stand. You have many tools. You have many tools in the toolbox. Sometimes you need a hammer. Sometimes you need a screwdriver. But the thing that doesn't change is the person having to use the tool. So sometimes,
Right.
sometimes people are just tools. They're not going to be. They're not going to be your friends. They're not going to be those colleagues, even if it's on a professional standpoint, and that's okay.
Yeah.
It's I had to tell the missus. She's like, well, so and so, not really a friend. I'm like, they never were.
And
Yeah. I'm like, hey, people are like, well, how come you don't have very many friends? I'm like, well, I said there's plenty of people that call me friend, but there's very few that I would say the same. I said, but the great part is, I don't have that many people that are going to call me to ask me to help them move. Yeah, like these hands don't do manual labor. I get paid to think, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
That cracks me up. But here's the thing. I know that with regards to the whiskey company, everything, you get your hands dirty and you do what it takes to be successful, right? I mean, so that's a nice joke, but for the most part, yeah, you might not want to be out there mowing your yard, but when it comes to advancing your business and growing your business, you'll get out there and do what it takes to be successful.
Oh, absolutely. I will. Again, I'm going to do absolutely everything that it takes. Like failure is just not an option. Like it's just,
Yeah.
you know, um, I mean, when it comes to the distillery, I'm not, I'm not quitting my job anytime soon. I don't need to, but the missus did. So, because, well, she know the only way this is going to be successful is for someone to do this full time. And it's, it's not going to be easy, but like, today when we get out of the show, like, we're going to go ferment, about 80 gallons of rum. So,
That's awesome.
we've got it was really quite interesting because it's like, all right, we learned a little bit more. Oh, what's this going on here? Like, in our big copper still. I'm like, all right, I got these elements, gonna go put the heating elements in it. I'm like, wait a minute. The colonel who created the still, he created the still elements as if they were going to be screw in. Well, the heating elements I got require a tri-clamp. I never thought to ask, and because I had no idea. So I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do now? I'm like, all right, there's got to be a connection, like a connector or something like that. Now I could go and get heating elements that would screw in, but they cost a little bit. What doesn't cost a little bit is me to get a whatever you want to call it, a threaded pipe that goes to tri-clamp. That costs it was like $16, and I need two of them. You know what's even interesting about that? No local hardware store carries them.
I would imagine not. I was like, you're on somebody's website or you're on Amazon.
Right, and and it's exactly what I had to do. I had to go to Amazon. Now they might have it because there's a local plumbing store, and so I could have gone to the plumbing store. They might have had it, but that's like 20 minutes away. That's a 40-minute drive. That I can go. Well, I can just do something else, and I'll just order it from Amazon in this case.
Right.
So I got those.
You did not need it immediately, so that was good.
Right. Because the other thing is, I mean, I could have always called them like, hey, do you happen to have this? But I may not even be describing it correctly because it's not like I'm a plumber or doing any of these things. I have to look up like, all right, what is it called? And I still don't know what it's called other than, it's a threaded pipe and it's got some acronym. I have no idea what it is, but,
Right.
So I'm like, cool. Now I go like, all right, well, let's go to the big mash tun. Sure enough, a couple of the spots on there. They're already set up for a tri-clamp. It's great, except two of the spots that you need to put on. The elements are fine. They're 2-inch, but the hose connections are 1.5 inches. I don't have 1.5 inch tri-clamps. Now I got everything else, but not the tri. So I'm like, well, back to Amazon. Got to order 2.5 inch tri-clamps. They show up tomorrow.
1.5 inches.
Well, yeah. So where the heating elements go under the 2-inch, but then for the hose fittings, where you're going to put the liquid coming out, and then if you want to do a recirculation, going back in. They're both 1.5 inches, and in the mean, so you have to have it to where, well, again, one of them happens to be I need multiple tri-clamps because you've got it's like a what do they call it, like a the lever, so that's like a ball.
Yeah, ball. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's got a lever and it's basically a ball. So that one's a tri-clamp here and a tri-clamp on this side in order to go to the hose. So I'm like, all right, need 2.5 inches there. And if I'm doing this on occasion, like for the sugar wash, it doesn't matter because you're not worried. The sugar just dissolves. But when I go to do this for the whiskey, you want a recirculation. So you put another hose in there, so that way it's coming out, it's going into a different container, to get reheated, comes back because you fill the other one up with about 15 gallons of water, so that way you're getting all the sugars off the grain. Um,
Right.
anyway, I don't have to worry about that just yet. But I'm like, well, I don't have 1.5 inch tri clamps. So I had to order those.
Thank God for Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, exactly. And the real funny part is like, all right, well, it puts me a little bit more delayed, a little bit more delayed, but it goes to prove my point that me and the missus both doing this part time, nothing gets done. Like you just don't make progress, because something always gets in the way. Now, and I go, well, hey, look, we've had all of our full permits and stuff like that since towards the end of October. We should have already been producing, but now we will be.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So how crazy is it in Ann Arbor yesterday? And
Well, it wasn't so bad because the game was in Indianapolis, right? So I'm sure there's a lot of people out last night and everything like that. But even after the Ohio State game, last Saturday, I watched the game. I watched the game at Pretzel Bell, and when the game got over, I was expecting to see this big flood of people come out, get into the bars and everything like that, be excited, get liquored up and everything like that. What I thought was folks that were out tailgating at sometimes 8 in the morning until the game started at noon. It was snowing, and then they had this emotional roller coaster of being with another 100+ thousand of their friends, getting snowed on and everything like that. And they were exhausted, right? Probably emotionally and physically. And they're cold. They're tired, like 3 of the other dwarves and everything like that. And you could see people while they were, their facial expression was exuberant. They wanted and everything like that. They were in a big hurry to get to their car, right, and get out of it. And that kind of surprised me. But even when about a month or so ago, they played Indiana for Parents Weekend, like a homecoming thing, and the game was at home. And the game was, I think it's 7 at night. So all afternoon, everybody was out and everything like that. But even then, they're not having fun and everything like that. But it was largely a civilized event. I mean, it's not a bunch of, it's mostly, non-college student adults that are coming back to watch the game. Either like for the Ohio State game, I was talking to a gentleman that came in from New England somewhere. He had my Boston sweatshirt on, so he started asking me where I was from, and he was saying that he booked his travel almost a year before the game, and the graduate rooms were they were at $1,400 a night.
crazy.
To be there, there's no shortage of people wanting to come watch the game, right? And I thought it was fantastic, right? I mean, it's the Ann Arbor, for me, I like Ann Arbor, and I think it's a great little college town. But it's also, people don't go nuts, right? I mean, that's like they're excited and everything like that. But I think you'll see it all week and you'll hear it and stuff like that. But I mean, yesterday there was Michigan basketball was playing San Diego State. And you could tell watching it on TV, and then boom, all of a sudden now everybody comes out. They come out of the game, it was a big win, but they weren't running around, wanting to trash the city or anything like that. It's like, hey, we won a basketball game, like we didn't cure cancer, right? So let's celebrate, let's be proud of the maize and blue, but by the same token, let's go have fun while we're doing it.
Yeah, I mean that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've both seen on television what happens when some schools win, right?
Well, act like you've been there before.
Right, even if you haven't.
All right.
I mean,
It's
most of the college students, I mean, they in their lifetime, they probably have no conscious memory of Michigan winning against Ohio State because I don't think it's happened for 8 years now.
Yeah.
Like they were,
Yeah, exactly. It had. Yeah, definitely.
2011, wasn't it?
It was something. It's been a minute. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's more than a day, but yeah. So no, it's cool. Like I think the town has a really cool vibe. I'm glad I live on the side of town I live on and everything like that. But nobody loses their minds, right? It's always fun to go out wherever you're at and hang out. And You know, it's for a college town. You don't get a bunch of people wanting to fight each other and anything like that. You know.
Yeah, I'm wondering though when we start talking about sports overall. When I take a look at a bunch of the kids growing up, I wonder if we will even have professional sports like where they are today in the United States in 10 or 15 years.
Um, I think baseball is going to be the first one to suffer, right? Because the average age of a baseball fan is, I'm not sure, but it can't be any younger than mid 40s.
Yeah,
Demographically, you're not getting a lot of American kids proportionally that want to spend the time with baseball. And if you look at somebody look like Dave Winfield, like I think he graduated from, I think it was Michigan State, right? Could be wrong on that, but I think
I don't know.
he could have played professional baseball, basketball, or football. Well, at the time the NBA this was in the 70s, they weren't the revenue generating monster that they are today. And the NFL, was pre-free agency or right around there, so there wasn't. Oh, she was like, I'm going to go play baseball because that was the one sport where you could have an extremely long career and make an above average living, right? It's all on scale, but for professional sports, nothing like today where like Scherzer's going to make 43 million a year for 3 years, right? But I also think like you look at baseball now where they were signing players to 10-year contracts. I think they're saying, well, the last probably 5 or 6 of that, depending on especially in that late 20s, early 30s, the last 5 or 6 years of that are at risk. And we're it's guaranteed salary, so they're on the hook for the balance of that. And what are they going to get? You effectively end up paying a player if you're paying them 35 grand in the last 5 years, they're terrible. You're effectively paying them 70 grand a year for the productive years.
Yeah,
Right? And I think teams now say, hey, I'll pay you a premium for 3 really good years, and then we'll reevaluate again. Right? And I think it's more prudent, but they're having to do that. I think so they're locked out now because they're probably looking at declining numbers and in some cases declining revenue. I think the opposite's happening. Like you look, I don't know this for sure, but if viewership is dropping off in baseball, for example, then the next TV contract stands to reason it'll be less. Right? And then that's a prime source of income and revenue for the teams. So where do you naturally take salaries and things like that? Inversely, the pro football, NFL, their viewership has gone up, so their TV right deal got to be much more expanded. Right? So, I think you're going to see. I think Howie Long said it best when he got inducted to the Hall of Fame. Baseball's America's pastime, football's America's passion. And I think it'll take a lot to displace the primacy of football, right? Basketball is, I think, it's ascending as well, and a lot of it is it's quick, it's an hour, it moves fast, right? You talk about youth today, it's like everything is short attention span, right? And so even in the conduct of an hour of basketball game, there's a lot of motion going on, like there's a lot of things happening. And there's a lot of unbelievable athleticism that takes place when you're taking a dude that's 6'11" and Kevin Durant and can shoot threes with the best of everybody, but then have the feet of a dancer down low. I mean, it's just one of many incredible athletes, right? And so I think I think potentially, and I don't know if it's going to turn the kids off as much as it turns adults off, but I'm talking once you get in your 30s and above, is the politicization of sports.
yeah,
Right, where you're going to ask all these athletes to comment on social. Hey, great, you have a cause, get out there, but don't. I think what some of the complaints that I hear when you hear people talking about sports, especially like when you're out and about, is it's like, hey, I go to sports to get a break from all the other nonsense in the world. Right now, the argument to that is sports are a metaphor or a window to society. Right, but I think when you have some athletes that are protecting a brand, right, and they'll ignore a lot of really bad behavior from different places to protect their brand. And while I understand that, don't talk to me like you have the moral high ground. right? And I think that is those people getting upset about that is probably the most direct threat to professional sports in the future, as opposed to any type of short attention span theater that we get into today, because everybody's got to move at the speed of light with zeros and ones.
So does your son watch football?
He's never been a ball and stick kid.
Yeah. So between the missus and I, we have 6 kids. Not one of them could tell you any real football player or basketball or baseball player. Like it's just none. And I'm just seeing that quite a bit now. With 3 of them, no, 4 of them, they could tell you some stuff about some of the e-gamers that are out there.
Yeah, and by the way, for anybody that wants to tell me that e-games belong on ESPN, it's not a sport.
Yeah.
It's an activity.
It's kind of like,
The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a little overusage or one of your thumbs. It's not a sport.
Yeah, well, that's why it's called e-games or esports. Like you're playing, it's a competition, but it's kind of like NASCAR. Like it's also not one of our sponsors. Not one of our sponsors. I know.
I'm surprised Stoney hasn't commented on that already.
I don't know if he's listening this morning. Last weekend he was like, "Oh, sorry, I was at Disney World." I'm like, well, "That's pretty goofy."
He's gonna take care of the little one.
Yeah, I'm like, "Don't you work?"
When you have kids, we have kids when you're over halfway to 100.
I know. You would think you would know how those things happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, don't you already have one? That's like, in college you're going to do this all over again?
Yes, sir. That was his answer. Yes, I will.
So that's what happens when you drink that, that really poor corn liquor that just does stuff to your brain to thinking you could do.
Go blind.
Yeah. He's like, I got a great idea. Let's have another kid.
She's an amazingly sweet young lady, though.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, she's awesome. So yeah, no, he and his wife are great people and everything like that. So
Very cool. Yeah, so I just go. I wondering that because I also see that colleges in and of itself are going to have to like really change, because I think a lot of kids will choose to do things like LinkedIn Learning. It's $250 a year, and you could get all the same coursework on LinkedIn Learning that you can at these universities.
well, and that's my thoughts or opinions on it is when the federal government started underwriting college loans to the extent that they are now, the universities figured out that with very little, with almost absolutely no penalty, right? Because as far as I know, student loans are one of the few things you cannot discharge in a bankruptcy.
Right.
That's if you think about that, when you take a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, you're saying, hey, feel free to take out $100,000 loan to go get a degree that will never pay you $100,000, right? And I'm not blaming the 18-year-old or 17-year-old. It's the system, right? And that's when college tuition costs started to astronomically rise, and it's form follows function, right? There was cheap free money out there, right? Then all of a sudden they're like, well, go get that, and then we can just start charging whatever because we're not going to feel it, right? I think when you start, the other bad problem is the politics of envy, right? People are like, oh, this coach makes this amount of money, and the football players do this, and none of it's anything but envy. It's somebody that's not getting that benefit, right? But I challenge anybody that wants to complain or bitch about like what a college athlete gets, live their life for a semester.
Yeah.
Right? And in most cases the day is structured from 6 in the morning till well past 7 or 8 at night with study halls and mandatory studying and things like that. Now, a lot of the athletes, um, certainly the ones that are really so like they like the discipline, right? They like the structure, and in the case of you look at now some of the salaries you're paying college coaches, right? Those salaries aren't going to the bottom tier. I mean, I think there's 117, roughly 120 D1 football programs. Right? You've got this top tier of the Alabamas, the LSUs, the Notre Dames, the Stanford, the big money generators, right? Those programs are not only bringing in an amazing sum of money, but they are generating that and providing that not just to fund other sports, but to build buildings, labs, libraries, and things like that, right? And that gets lost in translation. And so I think in the case of Alabama, for example, it's probably about $150 million a year in revenue comes in. And you're going to complain about how much you pay the leader of that organization in Nick Saban, who not only has done a tremendous amount for the University of Alabama and what they do and why, but has become this bellwether for how programs should be run. And you look at, for the most part, his coaching tree, unlike in professional sports, like Belichick's coaching tree is one of the best coaches ever to coach the game. But his assistants that leave there's no assumption that they're ever going to win a game.
Yeah, they don't tend to do very well.
It doesn't translate well, right? But the way that Saban has built the program, it translates well when those coaches leave and they go get other opportunities somewhere else.
Yep.
Right? And you look at like last night, Kirby Smart, who's the head coach of Georgia. He played for Georgia, then he went and he basically was a disciple of Saban's for a long time. Dabo Sweeney is the same way. And you look at all these programs that have ascended and are consistently in the top 5 or 10, they learned how to run and manage the business of big-time college football. Right? But basketball is a different animal. It can generate a lot of revenue, but you're doing it with 15 kids in it's a very inexpensive sport to buy your way into D1, whereas football is demonstrably not. Right? And when you talk about college athletics and people losing weight, it's the low end of that thing. The University of Massachusetts is always one of the worst schools in America right now at college, UMass Amherst. Well, how much does that cost the system? Right? Because they're not in the SEC with those television rights. Right? They don't have the same level of boosters and everything like that. Right? If you look on the academic side, you take a school like Harvard. I mean, my favorite line about Harvard is it's not an educational institution, it's a hedge fund that educates the children of wealthy Americans. Right? And they're a massive endowment. But here's the thing, if you get into Harvard and your family's AGI is less than 90 grand, you go for free.
Yeah.
And there's almost no one there that pays anywhere near sticker price for an education. Right? Because they know how to manage the business of college education. But when you start talking about mid-tier schools, low-tier schools, the for-profit education system that has popped up that a lot of people avail themselves of, you're right. Where can I get the learning, right? And I think there'll be less emphasis in most of you've heard me say this before. I think that coding in particular is it's the blue collar job of the 21st century.
Yeah.
Right? Everybody, you're going to have coders and everything everywhere. And they'll be able to feed their families, send their kids off to school, have a lifestyle, go on vacation, but they're not going to, they're going to be the underpinnings of the middle class and jobs like that. Right? But at some point, we're still going to have to get back to telling our kids it's okay to go to a trade school and get a vocation and work with your hands. Right? Because last time I checked, houses still require electricity and plumbing. Right? So we might need electricians and plumbers in the 21st century and keep going because then what's the home automation look like? Well, then that comes to those developers and things like that, right? But I think that you're going to see baseball fade away in the next 30 years. I think there'll be an expansion of basketball, and I think from a global market, I think soccer is going to play a bigger role in the next 30 years in the U.S. I think the MLS is onto something as far as how they lost the game.
Yeah. Probably Comcast doing me a good number.
But the MLS is onto something as to how they manage. Oh, sorry. But I
Uh,
think the MLS is on it with the salary cap and the way they manage it, and the influence of younger players, right? But this is interesting. So the general manager of the Red Bulls is a friend of mine, and we were talking one day about, I said to him, I go, how long do you think it's going to take, um, the MLS to create parity with any of the European leagues? And he's like, at least 30 years. And then I was like, why? He goes, because when I go out to a soccer field in the U.S. and I see a kid with a ball on the end of his foot, I know he's gonna have a basketball in his hand when that season's over, and a baseball or something else in his hand in the spring. Then he'll get back to soccer, right? He goes, where if I go to Brazil and I see a kid who's really good with a ball on the end of his foot, I know every day he's gonna have that on his foot. And the business of professional soccer is where you start making money. Is it's your ability to arbitrage players, right? Find a kid when he's 14, sell him for a lot of money when he's 17, right? And the MLS in particular, in how numbers affect the salary cap, is heavily stilted towards youth. The basketball's that way, right? Give me some 19-year-old kid. I want a one and done because I get him when he's 19 years old, and I get a lot of young potential out of him. And baseball, to a certain extent, is the same way, right? And the NFL is getting onto that model now with get me a great quarterback on his rookie deal, because then I got 4 or 5 years to pay everybody else around him, right? I think when people hear about the raw numbers in professional sports, envy creeps out a lot. We talk about that. We talk about that pretty regularly. You hear out in bars people talking about how much athletes get paid and everything like that. But the economics of it are fascinating to me, about the human capital piece of it and how we view things. Like, I think one of the best things the NFL did was they basically put a rookie wage scale in place. Like, cause remember before these guys drafted, and like I think Sam Bradford was the last big guy to get a big contract. It was either him or Stafford, and they got a $54 million deal, $50 million deal before they even took a snap.
Yeah.
Right, and now you get the Patrick Mahomes, you get these guys, you get them on a rookie deal, and now you can build a great team around them. And if they're remotely functional, you have the opportunity to go drive deep into the playoffs and maybe win a Super Bowl. And I think they're picking up on like the global trend towards valuing youth, right? Because for people that don't know, like in the MLS, there's about a $5.5 million payroll, but it's a euphemistic number, right? The more younger players you have, you're not paying a 1-to-1 penalty against the cap for that. And then you have like three wild cards where I can go get players. And that's how Zlatan or David Beckham or somebody can come here and they can pay him $10-20 million a year to play in the MLS. Because if the ownership group is willing to spend that money is largely outside the cap. If I bring somebody that's under 22 and it costs me $150,000 against the cap, even if I'm paying him $20 million. If he's like 22 to 25, he costs me, I think it's $300 against the cap. And then if he's older than that, it costs me $600 against the cap. Right? So they've come out with effective ways to allow teams to bring in great players to attract new fans and attention and bring things to the sport. But how quickly can they get to critical mass where now the TV package becomes relevant? Right? And I think if you look at most of the MLS teams have the ownership is starting to churn a little bit. But you look at Robert Kraft. I mean, he's been losing money in the NFL in the MLS for 20 years, right? And so, what's it comparable to, right? So, how do we get to? I think if there's fan engagement is much better. Like, especially like in Seattle and New York and some of the big markets that have a big international like residents crowd. But I think 30 years from now we'll be saying, well, that baseball was great. But again, now you're globalizing a lot of this. Basketball and soccer in particular, they do very well globally. And I could see where you would have the NBA champions playing EuroLeague champions.
Yeah, it could be. I think
Right, and things like that. And I think that's
Yeah, I think what I believe we'll start to see much more of is a decline in a lot of the team sports, and because of the popularity of combat sports now. Um, and it's getting back to uh, individuals rather than teams.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I think just because they're not wearing helmets, the NBA in particular is a very player-centric defined league, right? And I mean, the NFL particularly has a rule against you taking your helmet off, right? And it goes back to when Emmitt Smith was playing for the Cowboys, just taking his helmet off. They're like, why? Because nobody can see my face underneath this helmet,
Yeah,
right? And and you drop that back into college, like with before name and likeness and everything. All these colleges were putting these kids' names on the back of jerseys and selling these jerseys left, right, and center, and they weren't getting compensated for it, right? And then they said, well, we'll take them off. Well, if your favorite player is number 7 on Ohio State, for example, and you buy a number 7 jersey, I'm thinking, what do you buy?
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's the disingenuousness, right, of what goes on. I mean, in professional sports, it's a completely different thing. I mean, I'm a big believer taking helmets off, right? Because average career is 3.5 years, right? In order to get retirement benefits from the NFL, you have to play 5 years, right? Man, that's akin to what Social Security was in the 40s.
Yeah.
Lifespan was about 54 years, and you had to wait till you were 65 to get it.
Yep, exactly.
Right? And I saw the other day they're talking about changing the name of Social Security to something like government benefit check. Like they're giving like everybody's like, you take my money and then later on you give me significantly less on the dollar and you call it a benefit.
Yeah. It's the only thing where you pay more into a fund and receive less.
Yep.
I mean, it's a government free loan.
That's actually that was fault that is. Well, no, I mean in general, how that took place, where it stopped being something that was almost 1-for-1, 2-for-1, when it goes to like 4.5, 5-to-1 now, beneficiaries to dollars.
Right.
Is when Nixon running for re-election in '72, he said he was going to lower welfare, AFDS. He said he was going to lower welfare. So if you pass away, your kids until they're 18 are going to get a Social Security benefit.
Right.
Right? That benefit used to be underneath AFDS or welfare. He pushed it over to Social Security, and then Congress over the years has basically taken away the fence around it, and that money is now part of the general budget. Right? But taking away or pushing a lot of things that were never meant to be in Social Security into Social Security. So when he's running for re-election, it's like, hey, left hand over here saved you money. Well, they're not looking at the long term, because that's something that you can't, in those benefits, you can't see the negative effect in the lifetime of that president, right? It took us 10 or 15 years to really understand how quickly that was starting to deplete funds.
Yeah. And this is what a lot of people don't get, because all you'll hear in the news is, China owns all this debt. Well, it's not the Chinese government per se, but the largest debt holder is the American citizens. we own most of the debt through the Social Security fund. Like that's people don't seem to get that is we're giving the government an interest-free loan. Because we're not getting you pay in $1 million, you're not getting $1 million out of it.
Well, you personally, if you paid $1 million, you actually contributed $2 million between that and employer contribution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, like, let's be honest about it. Like, I've said it before. The biggest thing of negligence in the past 30 years of the government is that Congress's inability to pass a budget every year.
Yeah.
Because they're like, you have one job. That's all you got. You got one job. You can't do it. And so the continuing resolution nonsense, all it does is stifle small business. Right? If that's your intent, keep doing it. Right? But if you want innovation and you want us to compete globally in technology or anything else, you've got to pass a budget so that those folks that sell into the government have a consistent basis for, getting revenue, right? Raytheon, Boeing, they can tolerate a government shutdown for a month. They might lose $10 million a day, but they understand that the minute they sign in the next continuing resolution or the next budget, the spigot opens back up and they get all their money back.
Yeah.
Right? A small business can't. And so what happens? Then that IP, that technology gets bought up by one of the big boys at pennies on the dollar because now you're desperate to keep your people employed and all the other things that go on with that. And now you stifle innovation.
Yep, absolutely. Well, my friend, it's time for me to go make some product. Got
Do that.
we got a lot to do this month. Got to make some money. All I've been doing is spending it.
You might want to change that for make some product because every time I've heard a heroin dealer talk about distribution, it's always
Make product. Well, except mine's legal. Mine's legal.
I'm not telling you how to run your business, but
Yeah. Nice. All right, my friend. Have a great rest of your week. Everyone out there, thanks for tuning in. Take care.